Hey, this is Automat DEVLOG number 9. Today we are going to talk about shapes. If you look at Automat, you can see that we have a lot of shapes in many places. The connections follow fancy curves. They are dynamic. When I drop them, they fly around. When I hold the connection, we also see outlines of many objects. And if you look carefully, you will see that those outlines, they actually, and you have to maybe pause the video to see this, but the outline follows the shape exactly and it grows dynamically. We have a lot of cool utilities for playing with shapes. So today I wanted to tell you about our lessons learned going through this adventure of shape development. So there are many formats that you can use for storing shapes. The most common one that you have probably seen everywhere is the SVG path format. But this is a text format. It's a format that you cannot really display directly on screen. You have to actually parse it first, and then you can rasterize it as a set of those primitives. So SVG paths alone are not really great for manipulating paths. They are good interchange format. The format that we use for storing shapes mostly is actually a class that comes from Skia. It's called skpath. It is a close relative of SVG paths. It doesn't use relative coordinates, and it has some very small differences. For instance, it cannot represent arcs. It's not as easy to use, I would say, as SVG paths, but it's still a good representation. It's something that's very workable. You can actually only use skpath for most of your shape needs if you so desire. But this wasn't enough for us. We wanted to do more dynamic operations on shapes. So this is something that we developed in-house. It's called arcline. Arcline is an internal representation of shapes within Automat, and it's actually the simplest type of curve. If you're familiar with turtle graphics, you will know that. Imagine you're a small turtle and you can only execute some simple operations. You can walk forward, turn left, turn right, with some radius. And that's it. So this is what we can do with this arcline class. Because we have such a limited number of verbs, it's easy to do some geometric operations on this shape. So the operation of parallel outset, or parallel offset as some people call it, is very easy because the first segment you shift to the right, and then when you encounter an arc, you just increase or decrease the radius depending on the direction. It's a very convenient representation, absolutely. We can translate and rotate it super fast. We can compute this convex contour very efficiently. But not all shapes in Automat are convex. Some of them have concave sections, like this that I show you here, or this end, right? For those shapes, we are actually using an external library called Cavalier Contours. Specifically, it's Polyline class. This is something that's very similar to arcline, to Automat's arcline actually. It uses absolute coordinates and it has a notion of belched lines. It's a very clever idea. It makes some operations very easy. It's a different representation. You have to learn how to work with it, but once you learn, it's a very fun way to define belched lines. We only use it to do parallel offset, but it's great at that. So with all those types of lines, which class, which type, which internal representation of shapes is actually the best one? And a very liberating realization for me in development of Automat was that since each shape representation is actually good for different things and we can efficiently translate between them because we can map from one shape representation into another, it doesn't really matter which one we pick. As long as we have this mapping, even if the mapping is lossy, even if the mapping is one-directional, it's still good enough. We don't really have to make an ultimate decision of the shape format that we're going to use. On the boundary, sure, we could go with SVG or skpath or whatever. It doesn't really matter because internally we can always translate it, and translation of path formats, as long as it's in linear time, it really doesn't matter what format you end up with. Alright, so that's it for this devlog. And as a small announcement, I might mention that we have now a Discord server for Automat. Feel free to join it. It doesn't matter if you're a user of Automat. I mean, if you're playing games and using this for automation of or if you're interested in programming and like technical topics. Anyway, see you in the next vlog. Bye.